He was never supposed to live. A war veteran, body broken, spirit betrayed, pushed from a cliff by the woman he loved most. They said he'd never rise again. But fate sent him a savior on 4 legs. A German shepherd named Max, scarred by battle, forged in loyalty, who tore through storm and shadow to bring his friend back from death. This isn't a story about pain, it's about faith, about the kind of love only heaven could design, the kind that looks death in the eye and doesn't blink. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And if you believe a dog's loyalty is the purest kind of love, hit subscribe and drop an amen in the comments, because this story will stay in your heart forever. The morning air in the Bitterroot Mountains carried a sharp, metallic chill that cut through every breath. Frost still clung to the pine needles, and a thin veil of fog hung low over the winding gravel roads that disappeared into the wilderness. Montana's winters had a way of making everything look suspended, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The Turner estate sat alone at the end of a long dirt path, surrounded by acres of forest and silence. Inside the small wooden cabin, Jack Turner, 38, stared out through the frost-rimmed window at the gray sky. The reflection that stared back was not the man he used to be. His hair, once dark brown and full, had grown shorter, streaked with silver near the temples. His face was strong and square, the kind that had known both command and consequence. A faint scar traced down from his right eyebrow to his cheekbone, a permanent souvenir from the explosion that ended his last deployment in Afghanistan. That blast had left him with nerve damage from the waist down. His legs were still there, but they no longer obeyed him. He rolled the wheelchair closer to the window. The faint hum of the motor echoed softly in the quiet house. Jack had learned to mask pain with discipline. His gray eyes, cold and steady, hid the sleepless nights and the memories that never truly faded. Once, he was the kind of man who led others through chaos without flinching. Now, even the smallest movements came with effort. But there was still strength in him. Quiet, stubborn strength. The sound of heels clicked on the wooden floor behind him. "Morning," a voice said smoothly. Vanessa Turner, 35, stood in the doorway holding 2 travel mugs. She was tall and slender, with flawless pale skin and sleek black hair tied into a tight bun. Her beauty was sharp, calculated, the kind that drew attention in cities and turned cold in small towns. A long beige coat hugged her figure. Underneath, a white turtleneck and black trousers added to her air of sophistication. Her lipstick, rosewood red, never smudged, even on days like this. "Coffee?" she asked. Jack turned his head slightly, forcing a half smile. "Thanks." Vanessa handed him the mug, but didn't linger. She moved with the grace of someone rehearsed, every step deliberate, every smile practiced. She was a woman built on control, of her image, her tone, her world. "You're quiet today," she said. "Just thinking," Jack replied, "about how different this place feels in winter." Vanessa glanced towards the window, her eyes narrowing at the endless whiteness outside. "It feels suffocating." He didn't respond. The silence between them had grown familiar, thick and sterile, like the air before a storm. 2 years of marriage had stripped away everything warm between them. She had once laughed at his dry humor, once traced her fingers over the scars on his arms, and called them proof of strength. But that was before she realized the man she married would never walk again. Jack took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and cold already. "You said we'd go somewhere today." "I did." Vanessa set her cup down and adjusted her gloves. "I thought we could drive up to Widow's Peak. The view's beautiful after the first frost." He hesitated. That's a steep trail. I'll handle it, she replied quickly, a flicker of irritation passing across her face. You always wanted to see it. Consider it a little adventure. Jack studied her expression. There was something in her voice. Flat, distant, too calm. But he nodded anyway. Maybe he wanted to believe this was her attempt at something normal. Maybe he just wanted to feel the world again beyond the walls of this wooden box. Within the hour, the couple set out. Vanessa wheeled Jack down the narrow path that wound through the pine forest. The crunch of gravel under the chair's tires echoed between the trees. The air smelled of wet bark and faint smoke, drifting from some far-off cabin. Halfway up the trail, the forest opened into a ridge where the horizon spilled wide, miles of snow-covered peaks and valleys fading into mist. The place locals called Widow's Peak. The ground here was uneven, parts of it softened by melted frost. Almost there, Vanessa said, her tone light but her eyes unreadable. Jack breathed deeply, watching his breath turn to fog. You sure this is safe? The edge looks… It's fine, she interrupted. You always talk too much when you're nervous. He smiled faintly. You sound like my old sergeant. Vanessa didn't smile back. She tightened her grip on the handles of the wheelchair. For a brief moment, her reflection in the chrome of the chair looked ghostly, pale and detached. She stopped near the overlook, where the trees fell away, and only sky and wind remained. Jack looked at the sunrise cresting over the ridges, golden light bleeding through the fog. Beautiful, he murmured. Vanessa's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but there was no warmth in it. You know what's funny? She asked softly. This was never supposed to be a life sentence. Jack frowned. What are you talking about? The marriage, she said quietly. The chair. The pity. I tried, Jack. I really did. Before he could speak, she leaned forward, her hands tightening on the armrests. Vanessa, what are you… But she had already released the brake. The world tilted. Gravel shifted beneath the wheels. Jack's breath caught as the edge disappeared from beneath him. For a heartbeat, there was only silence, the kind that comes before the fall. Then the wheelchair lurched forward, weightless. He didn't scream. The air rushed past him, icy and sharp. Then came the impact, a brutal collision of metal, flesh, and stone. The world went white, then black. Above, Vanessa stood motionless. She exhaled, slowly, her expression blank, then stepped back from the edge. She wiped her palms on her coat, turned, and began walking down the trail. Her footsteps were almost soundless against the gravel. Far below, the broken chair lay tangled between two jagged rocks, tilted at an impossible angle. Jack's body was crumpled, but still, a faint movement in one arm, proof of life. The morning light touched the blood along his sleeve, turning it to dull crimson. Back at the cabin, a low whine pierced the silence. Max, the Turners' German shepherd, stirred from his place on the porch. 6 years old, broad-shouldered and muscular, with a sable coat of black and tan brushed with ash gray, he looked every bit the soldier he once was. His amber eyes were sharp, intelligent, filled with a loyalty that had survived war and peace alike. Max had served alongside Jack during his last deployment, trained to sniff explosives and protect lives. When Jack was discharged, Max came home with him. But Vanessa had never liked him. No dogs in the house, she had said. He sheds, he smells, he doesn't belong. So Max stayed outside, tied to a cedar post near the orchard. Yet every night he lay facing the house, ears pricked, guarding what was his. Now something was wrong. He could smell it. Fear, blood, the absence of Jack's scent. He whined, tugged against the rope. The tension grew until the fibers began to fray. He barked once, sharp and desperate, then yanked again. The rope snapped. Max bolted through the orchard, his paws pounding over frost-slick ground. He ran past the fence, through the trees, following the faint metallic tang of blood and the lingering echo of his master's voice. The fog thickened as he climbed higher. Branches whipped against his flanks, but he didn't slow. At the ridge, the smell of iron grew stronger. Max skidded to a halt near the overlook, his claws scraping rock. The earth was disturbed. 2 deep grooves where the wheelchair wheels had carved their path towards the edge. He sniffed once, twice, and then barked furiously, head lifting toward the clouds. The sound echoed across the valley, raw and haunting. Below, somewhere in the mist, a faint human breath answered. Max's ears perked. His eyes darted between the void and the trail back home. For a moment he froze, torn between staying and fetching help. Then instinct decided for him. He turned and sprinted back down the mountain faster than he'd ever run before, his muscles burning, his breath steady and fierce. Behind him, the wind rose over the peaks, carrying with it the echo of that single desperate bark. The cry of a soldier's dog who refused to surrender. And high above, on the empty ridge, the fog swallowed everything but silence. The wind howled through the canyon like an echo of the past. Far below the cliff's edge, Jack Turner hung between life and death, his wheelchair wedged between 2 jagged rocks that jutted out from the mountain face. His chest rose and fell in shallow, broken rhythm. Blood trickled down his arm, soaking into the sleeve of his jacket. His head lolled to one side, consciousness flickering like a dying ember. Every breath came with pain, each second a reminder that he was still alive when he shouldn't be. Above him, clouds rolled heavy and low, casting the Bitterroot Mountains in muted silver and ash. Somewhere beyond the trees, the sound of barking cut through the quiet like a siren. Max sprinted down the dirt road, his paws striking the ground in desperate rhythm. Mud and frost splashed beneath him as he weaved between the pines. The cold wind burned through his fur, but he didn't slow. His mind, trained through years of discipline, followed one thought, one scent. Jack, the man who had once saved him in the desert heat of Afghanistan, who had carried him when shrapnel tore into his flank. Loyalty wasn't a word for Max. It was instinct. He burst through the tree line, crossing the open stretch of pasture that separated the mountain from the small ranch down the hill. Smoke curled from the chimney of a cabin where a tall man stood near a stack of firewood. Sam Whitaker, 42, paused mid-swing with his axe as he heard the barking grow louder. Broad-shouldered, built from years of labor, Sam had the rough edges of someone molded by both war and wilderness. His once black hair had turned iron gray at the sides, and a trimmed beard framed his weathered face. A long scar crossed the back of his left hand, an old burn from an IED blast that had ended his career in the Marines. The blast had also taken 2 of his friends. Since then, Sam had carried a quiet guilt, one that made him protective of those few he still called brothers. Jack was one of them. When Max came barreling toward him, Sam dropped the axe. The dog's fur was streaked with dirt and frost, his chest heaving, eyes burning with urgency. Max stopped just short of him and barked, sharp and insistent. Then he bit gently at Sam's jacket sleeve, tugging, pulling him toward the forest. "Whoa, boy. Easy," Sam said, kneeling to meet the dog's gaze. "What is it? Where's Jack?" Max growled low in his throat, pulled again, and looked back toward the mountains. Sam's gut twisted. He grabbed his coat and flashlight from the porch, his voice steady but grim. "All right, show me." The dog spun and took off, and Sam followed at a jog, boots crunching over the frozen ground. The air grew colder as they entered the forest path, the same one leading to Widow's Peak. The trail was narrow, lined with tall pines that whispered in the wind. They reached the clearing within minutes. Sam stopped, his breath visible in the frigid air. The earth near the cliff was disturbed, deep grooves carved into the mud. He crouched, running his calloused fingers along them, wheelchair tracks, the same kind Jack used. They didn't curve. They didn't stop. They went straight to the edge. "Oh God," Sam muttered. He crawled closer, peered over the side. Below, through the mist, a glint of metal caught the faint morning light. His stomach clenched. He saw movement, barely there, a trembling arm reaching weakly. "Jack," Sam's voice cracked. "Hang on, buddy, I see you." A faint reply drifted up through the wind. "Sam." It was enough. Sam's hands shook as he pulled his phone from his pocket. No signal. The mountains had always been a dead zone. He cursed under his breath, then turned to Max. "Stay here," he ordered, pointing to the cliff. "Watch him." Max lay down immediately, chest pressed to the ground, head tilted over the edge. His ears twitched at every faint sound below. Sam ran back down the path, heart pounding. By the time he reached the ranch again, his breath came in ragged bursts. He tore open the barn door, scattering dust into the cold air. Inside, shafts of light filtered through cracks in the walls, illuminating old tools and a battered red pickup truck. Against the far wall stood a locked cabinet, one he hadn't opened in years. He kicked the latch. It broke with a metallic snap. Inside, coiled under a faded tarp, lay a set of climbing gear, a rope, harness, and carabiners, left over from their marine training days. Sam's fingers trembled as he inspected the rope, frayed in places, but it would have to do. He grabbed everything, slung it into the back of his truck, and peeled out of the barn, tires spitting gravel. The drive back up the mountain was short but treacherous. The trail narrowed to a single lane, bordered by thick brush and ice patches. He parked the truck just shy of the overlook and killed the engine. The world was quiet again, except for the low growl of the wind and the distant bark of Max. Sam grabbed the gear, jogged the last stretch. Max was still there, soaked and panting but unmoved. His amber eyes glowed with fierce focus. "Good boy," Sam said under his breath, clipping the harness around his waist. His fingers worked fast, tying knots the way he used to when extracting men from ravines overseas. He looped the rope around a thick pine trunk and leaned over the edge. "Jack, you still with me?" A faint groan answered. "I'm coming down," Sam called, voice steady. "Just don't you dare die on me." He began his descent. The rock face was slick with frost, every foothold a test of strength. Halfway down, lightning flickered across the clouds. Rain began to fall, not heavy, but cold enough to turn the surface into glass. Sam's muscles burned. His gloves scraped against rough stone, drawing blood from his knuckles. At last, he reached the outcropping. Jack lay twisted against the boulder, eyes half open, skin pale. Blood streaked his temple. His breathing was ragged. "About time," Jack croaked, his lips cracking into a weak smile. Sam knelt beside him, checking his pulse. "You stubborn bastard." Jack tried to speak but coughed instead. "Thought I was done." "Not yet," Sam said. He unzipped his coat and pulled out a thermal blanket, wrapping it around Jack. "You're not dying on my watch." Above them, Max barked again, loud, rhythmic, encouraging. Jack's eyes fluttered toward the sound, recognition flickering through the haze. "Good boy," he whispered. Sam tightened the harness around Jack's torso and legs, securing the knots. "All right, brother. Time to get you home." The climb back up was slow and brutal. Sam braced himself, pulling inch by inch, using the pulley system he'd improvised. Mud smeared his face. His breath came in sharp gasps. Twice, the rope slipped, but Max's bark spurred him on. The dog's silhouette appeared through the mist above, loyal, unmoving, a guardian at the edge of the world. When Sam's hand finally caught the lip of the cliff, he heaved himself up with a roar of effort, dragging Jack's limp body with him. They collapsed side by side, gasping. Max rushed to them immediately, whining, licking Jack's face, tail thrashing with joy and relief. Jack's hand rose weakly, brushing over the dog's head. "Still watching my six, huh?" he murmured. Sam lay on his back, chest rising and falling. "Damn right he is." The rain began to fall harder now, washing away the dirt and blood. The three of them, man, soldier, and dog, lay beneath the storm's gray curtain, alive but battered. Sam turned his head toward Jack, voice low but steady. "Let's get you out of here, brother." Jack's eyes closed, exhaustion pulling him under. But even as darkness took him, he could still feel the warmth of fur against his arm, and the soft hum of loyalty that refused to die. Above them, thunder rolled across the sky like the beat of an old war drum, one that had called them both before, and, somehow, still called them now. The storm came without warning. One moment the sky above the Bitterroot Mountains was a pale gray veil. The next, it was a wall of rain and sound. Thunder cracked across the peaks, echoing like cannon fire, while lightning streaked through the clouds, lighting up the valley in flashes of white and blue. The pine trees swayed violently under the wind's assault, their branches snapping like bones. On the narrow ridge of Widow's Peak, Sam Whitaker tightened his grip on the rope that bound him to the pine trunk and glanced down at the figure hanging just below him. Jack Turner was barely conscious. His head hung forward, and blood had dried in a dark smear across his cheek. The rain washed over his face, carrying the crimson away, but the cold was relentless. His jacket clung to him like lead. His lips moved, forming a single word that was lost beneath the wind. Max. Above them, Max, the 6-year-old German shepherd, stood at the cliff's edge, drenched and trembling but unyielding. His fur was plastered to his frame, revealing the muscular build beneath. Every few seconds, he barked, a deep, resonant sound that cut through the rain. It wasn't panic. It was command. It was faith. Sam dug his boots into the mud, the ground crumbling beneath him as he braced his legs. "Hold on, Jack," he shouted over the roar of the storm. "I'm not losing you here." Jack's eyes fluttered open briefly. Through the haze, he saw Sam's determined silhouette above him and the faint shadow of Max at the top. For a moment, the memories of another storm returned, one not of rain, but of sand and bullets, years ago in Afghanistan. He remembered Sam yelling over explosions, the same tone, the same strength. And beside him then, too, had been Max, smaller, younger, his fur still golden and untouched by gray. Jack coughed, the taste of iron filling his mouth. "You never quit, do you?" "Not my style," Sam grunted. He repositioned his harness and began the climb, one hand at a time. Each movement sent pain shooting up his shoulders. The rope creaked, rain slicked and heavy, but it held. Every pull felt like lifting the weight of an entire war. Mud splattered across Sam's face as pebbles broke loose from the rock face, tumbling past them into the mist below. His breath came in ragged gasps. He forced himself to focus. One motion, one knot, one heartbeat at a time. At the top, Max barked again, pacing along the ridge, his paws slipping on the slick ground. He peered over the edge, his amber eyes locking onto Jack's fading movement. The dog lowered his chest, tail rigid, ready to lunge if he had to. The storm intensified. Sheets of rain lashed against the mountain, turning soil to sludge. Sam's grip slipped once, and the rope jerked violently. Jack groaned. "Don't you dare let go!" Sam shouted. "Wouldn't dream of it," Jack murmured weakly. When Sam finally reached the outcropping where Jack's wheelchair had wedged, he anchored his boots and reached for him. Jack's skin was ice cold, his pulse faint but present. "Got you," Sam whispered. He clipped a secondary carabiner to Jack's harness and locked it in place, then tugged twice on the main rope. Signal to climb. The storm answered with another crack of thunder that shook the ground. The climb back up was brutal. Sam's muscles screamed with each pull. The rope cut into his gloves, drawing blood that mixed with rainwater. Jack dangled below him, motionless except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. Above, Max growled and barked continuously, pacing the rim of the cliff, his ears pinned back against the wind. He could see their forms rising through the mist, inch by inch, two dark silhouettes fighting gravity and fate. Halfway up, the wind shifted, blowing directly against them. The rope swung hard, slamming Jack's body into the rock wall. He groaned in pain. Sam braced himself, teeth gritted, and adjusted the angle. "Almost there, buddy," he said, voice shaking from exhaustion. "Don't call me buddy," Jack whispered hoarsely. "You sound like my therapist." Sam let out a tired laugh, despite himself. "Then you'd better pay your copay when this is over." Finally, Sam's right hand caught the lip of the cliff. He planted his boots, hooked the rope through a protruding root, and hauled himself over the edge with a roar. Jack followed moments later, his body scraping against the stone until Sam rolled him onto solid ground. The two men collapsed side by side, rain pounding their faces. Max rushed forward instantly, whining, licking Jack's cheeks, circling him as if making sure he was real. The dog's eyes shone with raw emotion, fear, relief, love, all tangled into one living thing. Jack weakly lifted his hand, resting it on Max's soaked fur. "You always find me," he whispered. Sam leaned back on his elbows, his chest heaving. The storm was beginning to ease, the thunder now a distant echo. The air smelled of wet pine and metal. After a long silence, Sam spoke. "We've got to move. You're bleeding bad." Jack tried to sit up, but winced. "My legs are useless, remember?" "Then I'll carry you." Sam stood, his knees protesting, and bent down, sliding his arms under Jack's shoulders. Years of field rescues had carved the movements into his muscles. It was instinct. He lifted Jack with a grunt and staggered toward the pickup parked a few hundred feet down the slope. Max followed close, tail low but alert, glancing behind them as if guarding against the mountain itself. By the time they reached the truck, the rain had turned to a drizzle. The world was quiet again, except for the rumble of the engine as Sam started it. Jack slumped in the passenger seat, shivering. Max jumped into the back, settling into a crouch, ears still twitching at every sound. As they drove down the winding road, the wipers struggled against the rain. Sam's eyes stayed fixed. Ahead, jaw tight. He'd seen men die before, but something about this, about Jack, made it different. It wasn't a battlefield. It was betrayal. Jack's voice broke the silence. "She did it, Sam." Sam didn't look over. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I figured." The headlights cut through the fog, revealing the curve ahead. The hospital wasn't far now, just beyond Helena, maybe 20 minutes if the roads held. Sam pressed harder on the gas. Max shifted in the back seat, his gaze locked on the two men up front. Every few minutes, he let out a soft whine, as if to remind them he was still there, still on guard. When they reached the outskirts of town, The storm had spent itself. The rain faded into mist, the streets slick and shining under the streetlights. Sam turned into the emergency bay of Helena General Hospital, tires screeching. The sliding doors burst open as he shouted for help. 2 nurses rushed out with a gurney, their scrubs damp from the drizzle. One of them, a woman in her early 30s with auburn hair pulled back into a ponytail, helped lift Jack from the seat. Her name tag read, Nurse Haley Prescott. Her eyes were wide with alarm but steady in motion. "He's hypothermic," she said. "Get him inside now." Sam followed close, soaked to the bone. Max jumped from the truck and trotted after them, ignoring the startled looks from hospital staff. When a security guard stepped forward to block the door, Sam snapped, "He stays. That dog saved his life." The guard hesitated, then nodded. Inside, the sterile light of the ER replaced the storm's darkness. Machines beeped, nurses moved like clockwork. Jack's stretcher disappeared behind a curtain, leaving Sam standing in the hallway with rain dripping from his hair and exhaustion weighing down his body. Max sat beside him, silent now, eyes fixed on the closed door. For a long time, neither moved. The storm outside had ended, but the real one, Sam knew, was just beginning. By the time the storm had drifted east across the valley, the Turner house looked untouched by the chaos that had unfolded hours earlier. The wooden porch gleamed with a thin layer of melted frost, and the smoke rising from the chimney carried the scent of vanilla candles rather than wood. Vanessa Turner stood in front of the hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of her beige wool coat. Her reflection showed no trace of panic. Her black hair was pulled tightly into a bun, her skin flawless, the faint blush on her cheek softening the hard line of her jaw. She dabbed a touch of rosewood lipstick, the same color she'd worn that morning when she had leaned over her husband's wheelchair and whispered goodbye without saying the word. She practiced her expression: concern, shock, then sorrow. Each look flickered across her face like a rehearsed performance. Satisfied, she picked up her phone and dialed a number saved under Dr. Langford Therapy Center. Her voice was calm, smooth. "Yes, this is Vanessa Turner. My husband left early this morning for his physical therapy session in Missoula. He hasn't come back yet. I just wanted to make sure everything went according to schedule." A pause. She tilted her head, listening. "Oh, I see. No, it's fine. Maybe he took a detour. He tends to be impulsive." Her lips curved slightly as she ended the call. The lie slid off her tongue like silk. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. Light, almost delicate. She walked to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of white wine, and sat by the window. The forest beyond the property looked endless. For the first time that day, Vanessa allowed herself a long, quiet breath. The plan was perfect. No witnesses, no suspicion, no evidence. By tomorrow morning, she would report Jack missing. Within weeks, the insurance claim would process. And then freedom. But upstairs, someone else was awake. Maria Alvarez, 56, the Turner family's housekeeper, moved quietly through the hall with a small trash bag in hand. She had worked for the Turners for nearly 5 years, ever since they moved from Phoenix. A widow from El Paso, Maria had raised 3 children on her own after her husband died in a factory accident. Her hands were rough, her back slightly bent from years of work, but her eyes, dark and alert, missed nothing. She entered the study to empty the wastebasket and froze. Crumpled papers littered the floor near the desk. One page caught her attention. The letterhead read, Missoula Physical Rehabilitation Center. She smoothed it out, frowning. The document claimed Jack Turner had been transferred for urgent treatment, signed by a Dr. Adam Langford. But the signature was sloppy, the ink uneven. Maria had cleaned this desk enough times to know Jack's handwriting. and this wasn't his. She picked up another paper from the trash. A second copy of the same form, printed twice, one with the date scratched out. A faint smell of toner hung in the air. Maria's chest tightened. "Madre de Dios," she whispered. She folded the papers neatly, slipped them into her apron, and looked towards the staircase. Down below, Vanessa was laughing softly on the phone, her voice sweet as honey. Maria backed away, her mind racing. She had no proof of what really happened, but something in her bones told her the truth was darker than anyone would believe. At the same hour, miles away, Helena General Hospital hummed with fluorescent light and the steady rhythm of medical machines. Jack lay unconscious in a recovery room, his body covered in wires and blankets. Beside his bed, Sam Whitaker sat in a chair, arms folded, exhaustion carved into his features. His clothes were still damp from the rain, but he refused to leave. Max, the German shepherd, lay curled at the foot of the bed, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but alert. Nurses had tried to move him earlier, but Sam had stepped in. "He's part of the treatment," he'd said flatly, and no one argued after that. The door creaked open. The nurse from earlier, Haley Prescott, entered quietly, clipboard in hand. Her auburn hair had loosened from its ponytail, strands framing her face. She smiled faintly at Sam. "He's stable now. You did everything right out there." Sam nodded. "He's tougher than he looks." Haley glanced at Max. "And that dog, he hasn't left his side once." Before Sam could reply, the hallway filled with the sharp click of heels. Both turned as Vanessa Turner appeared in the doorway, immaculate as ever. Her coat was dry, her hair perfect, her face composed into the perfect portrait of concern. She clutched a leather handbag in one hand, the other pressed to her chest as if holding back tears. "Oh my God," she gasped softly. "Jack." Haley instinctively moved aside, but Max's head snapped up. The dog's low growl reverberated through the room, his ears flattened, hackles raised, teeth bared. "Easy, boy," Sam murmured, standing slowly. But Max wasn't listening. His growl deepened, eyes locked on Vanessa. Vanessa froze, her composure flickering for the first time. "What's wrong with him?" she asked, her voice trembling. Haley stepped closer to the bed, uneasy. "He's protecting his owner. Maybe he doesn't recognize you right away." "Oh, he recognizes me," Vanessa said quietly, almost to herself. Jack stirred faintly, his eyelids fluttering open for a split second. "Max," he whispered. The dog immediately shifted closer, pressing his body against the bed. Haley motioned for Vanessa to wait outside until Jack was fully awake. Vanessa hesitated but obeyed, stepping into the hallway. As the door closed, she exhaled sharply, her jaw tightening. In the waiting area, another figure stood observing the scene through the glass window. Detective Janelle Hart, a woman in her late 30s with shoulder-length blonde hair and sharp blue eyes, had been assigned to investigate Jack's case after the ER report noted suspicious circumstances. Dressed in a gray trench coat and jeans tucked into worn boots, she looked more like a reporter than a cop. But the badge clipped to her belt carried weight. She'd served 10 years in the Helena Police Department, most of them in homicide. A near-fatal car accident 2 years ago had left a faint scar above her eyebrow and a permanent limp in her left leg, but she wore it like armor. Her instincts were rarely wrong, and right now they screamed that something about this case didn't add up. She walked toward Vanessa. "Mrs. Turner?" Vanessa turned, blinking. "Yes, oh, thank God. Someone finally here to explain all this." Hart gave a polite smile. "I'm Detective Hart. I just have a few questions." "Of course," Vanessa said, clutching her bag tighter. But can it wait until my husband wakes up? It'll just take a minute. Hart's voice was calm, almost friendly. You mentioned he was on his way to Missoula this morning? Yes, Vanessa said, steadying her tone. He left early. I told him not to drive, but he insisted. You know Jack, stubborn. Hart tilted her head. Drive? Yes. Your husband uses a wheelchair, correct? Vanessa froze for half a heartbeat, then smiled faintly. Of course. I meant, he had Sam, his friend. Maybe Sam drove him, I don't know. Everything happened so fast. Hart nodded slowly, studying her. Right. Fast. Behind them, the muffled sound of Max barking again broke the silence. Vanessa flinched. Hart's gaze followed the sound. That dog seems to know something you're not telling us. Vanessa forced a laugh, soft and practiced. He's traumatized. They both are. But Hart didn't laugh. Her eyes stayed on Vanessa's face, calm but unblinking. Maybe, she said finally. But I've learned something in my job. Dogs don't lie. Vanessa's smile faltered. Hart handed her a card. I'll need to speak with you again once your husband's awake. Please don't leave town. As Hart walked away, Vanessa's fingers tightened around the card until it bent. She turned toward the hospital doors, her reflection ghosted in the glass. For the first time, the woman who lived on control saw something she couldn't rehearse. Fear staring back at her. The hospital room was quiet, except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the faint hum of the air vents. Outside, dawn crept over Helena, turning the sky from slate gray to pale gold. The scent of disinfectant mixed with rain that still clung to the windows. Jack Turner lay propped slightly against his pillows, his face pale but alert, his eyes, cold steel under heavy lashes, focused on the doorway where Sam Whitaker stood with a coffee in hand. You look like hell, Sam muttered. Jack's lips curved faintly. You should see the other guy. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper, the kind that carried the weight of both pain and memory. He turned his head slowly. She did it, Sam. Sam frowned. Who? Jack's jaw tightened. Vanessa. She pushed me. The words hung in the sterile air, sharp as glass. Max, curled at the foot of the bed, raised his head and gave a low growl that rumbled deep in his chest. It wasn't just instinct. It was understanding. His amber eyes flicked between the two men, and his tail thumped once against the linoleum, as if confirming the truth. Sam's expression darkened. I knew it, he said. I knew something didn't fit. He set the coffee aside and leaned closer. We'll make her pay for it, Jack. You just need to rest. Before Jack could respond, a knock came from the door. Detective Janelle Hart entered, trenchcoat draped over her arm, a small notepad in hand. Her blue eyes were steady, focused, and unreadable. Morning, gentlemen. Sam straightened. Detective? Hart nodded to Jack. You're lucky to be alive, Mr. Turner. I'd like to ask you a few questions if you're up for it. Jack gestured weakly. Might as well. I'm not going anywhere. Hart moved closer, pulling up a chair beside the bed. She flipped open her notebook, pen poised. Can you tell me what happened that morning? Jack exhaled slowly. She said she wanted to take me to Widow's Peak. Said it was our anniversary. I should have known something was off. She kept quiet the whole way, didn't even look at me. When we got there, she pushed me. Just let go. Hart's brow furrowed slightly. Did she say anything before that? Yeah, Jack whispered. She said she gave it a shot. That this life, me, the chair, the pity, it wasn't supposed to be forever. Sam clenched his fists. That cold-hearted... Hart raised a hand. We'll handle it, Mr. Whitaker. She turned back to Jack. You're saying she planned this? She rehearsed it, Jack said flatly. She even called the rehab center to cover her story before she did it. Hart's eyes narrowed. Interesting you mention that. She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a small plastic folder. Inside were printed documents, crisp but clearly smudged with ink fingerprints. These came from your housekeeper, Maria Alvarez. She found them in your trash. Jack's eyes widened slightly. Maria? Hart nodded. Smart woman. She recognized the signature was forged. We confirmed with the real Dr. Langford. He never signed these. She laid the papers on the tray beside the bed. She also provided us with something else. She pressed play on her phone. A recording filled the room, crackling but clear. Vanessa's voice, cool and controlled, drifted through the speaker. When he dies, I'll be the one to sign the rest. They'll never question me. Not when I'm crying. The sound of clinking glass followed, and then silence. Jack turned his face away, his throat tightening. Sam muttered a curse under his breath. Hart stopped the recording. We'll be filing for an arrest warrant within the hour. I need you to verify this is her voice. Jack nodded slowly. It's her. Hart stood. That's all I need. She looked toward Max, who was now sitting upright, ears perked. That dog's your best witness, Mr. Turner. Maybe not in court, but in truth. A faint smile touched Jack's lips. He's the only one who never lied to me. Hart left the room, her heels clicking against the tile. Sam exhaled deeply, rubbing his temples. You hear that? We've got her. Jack closed his eyes, whispering. About time. By late afternoon, the news had already begun to spread through Helena. Word of a veteran surviving a cliff fall had reached the local radio station. Reporters were gathering outside the hospital, cameras flashing every time an ambulance door opened. Inside, Hart was in motion. She stood in front of a bulletin board at the precinct, reviewing the compiled evidence, photocopies, timestamps, financial records, and the voice recording transcribed in print. Her partner, Officer Cole Renair, a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s with a buzz cut and a face weathered from too many winters in Montana, approached holding a file. Warrants signed. County judge expedited it. Hart took the folder, flipping through it. Good. Let's move before she slips. Renair grinned grimly. You ever notice how these perfect ones always crack first? Hart didn't smile. There's nothing perfect about murder. They drove through the falling dusk toward the Turner estate. The sky was bleeding orange and purple, the snow from earlier now hardened into ice along the road's shoulder. When they arrived, the house glowed warmly under the porch light, the picture of domestic tranquility. Inside, Vanessa Turner was on the phone again, her tone breezy and calm. Yes, Thad. I'll be by tomorrow morning to discuss the property transfer. Oh, and make sure the paperwork for the trust is ready. The knock came, firm and deliberate. Vanessa paused, her brow tightening. She crossed the hall, heels clicking against the wooden floor, and opened the door. 2 badges flashed in the porch light. Mrs. Turner, Hart said, voice level. You're under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, and falsification of medical documents. For the first time, Vanessa's mask slipped. Excuse me? Renair stepped forward, reading her rights in a steady tone. Hart handed her a printed warrant, the bold letters of her name staring back at her. You can't do this, Vanessa said, her composure unraveling. You have no proof. Hart tilted her head. We have your voice. We have the forged documents, and we have a witness who survived. Vanessa's face went pale. The glass of wine she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. As Renair cuffed her wrists, Maria Alvarez appeared at the end of the hall, silent, her dark eyes glistening, She clutched a rosary in her hand and whispered a prayer. Vanessa turned toward her, voice shaking. "You did this." Maria met her gaze evenly. "No, Senora. You did." Outside, the snow began to fall again, heavier now, muffling the sound of the squad car's tires as it rolled down the gravel drive. The next morning, headlines spread across the state. Disabled veteran survives after wife pushes him off cliff. Loyal dog alerts rescuers. Reporters flooded the hospital, but Jack refused interviews. He asked only that any credit given go to the dog who never stopped believing. As the sun rose over Helena, Max lay beside his bed, his head resting on Jack's hand. The light caught the faint silver in his fur. "Looks like we made the news," Sam said, standing by the window. Jack smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe someone will finally believe what loyalty really looks like." Snow fell softly over Helena that morning, blanketing the courthouse steps in white. The air was sharp and cold, biting at the faces of the reporters gathered outside. Cameras flashed as the doors opened, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Inside, courtroom 4B buzzed with restrained anticipation. Veterans, townsfolk, and journalists filled every seat. At the front, beneath the Montana state seal, the American flag hung solemnly above the judge's bench. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Martha Redcliffe." Judge Martha Redcliffe, a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, walked in with a composed dignity that silenced the room. She had the reputation of being firm but fair, with a gaze that could cut through deception like glass. Her black robe draped neatly over her frame, and her expression carried the gravity of someone who had seen every kind of lie, but never stopped believing in truth. Everyone stood, then sat when she nodded. Court is now in session for the state of Montana versus Vanessa Turner. The defendant sat at the table to the left. Vanessa Turner, dressed in a gray pantsuit, looked far removed from the woman who once glowed in designer clothes and perfect lipstick. Her hair, no longer meticulously styled, was tied back in a ponytail. Her eyes, ringed with fatigue, darted across the room. She gripped a tissue in her manicured hands, as if it were the last thread of her composure. Across from her sat Jack Turner, his body upright in his motorized wheelchair. He wore a dark navy suit that hung a little loose around his frame, his face lined and lean from the hospital recovery. Yet his steel-gray eyes burned with focus. Beside him sat Max, his German shepherd, fur-brushed, vest cleaned, and a faded K9 tag hanging proudly around his neck. The dog's posture was rigid, alert but calm, his head resting lightly on Jack's knee. At the plaintiff's table, Detective Janelle Hart sat behind the prosecutor, arms crossed. She had swapped her trench coat for a tailored blazer, her blonde hair pinned up neatly. Though she wasn't the one questioning witnesses, her eyes tracked every movement in the room. The prosecutor, David Kellerman, a man in his early 40s with dark hair and sharp features softened by a steady demeanor, rose first. He was known for his patience and methodical precision, a man who built his cases like fortresses. "Your Honor," he began, "this is not a story of misfortune or misunderstanding. This is a story of betrayal. The state will show that Vanessa Turner deliberately pushed her husband, Jack Turner, from a cliff and attempted to conceal her crime through forged documents and lies." The defense attorney, Elaine Foster, a thin woman in her late 30s with auburn curls and a measured voice, rose next. "Your Honor, my client is a woman who broke under the weight of caring for a disabled spouse. She acted out of exhaustion, not malice." Judge Redcliffe raised an eyebrow. "We'll let the evidence decide that, Ms. Foster." The first witness called was Sam Whitaker. He stepped up to the stand in a pressed black shirt, his beard trimmed but his expression grave. When he took the oath and sat, his gaze met Jack's for a brief second, an unspoken bond between soldiers. "Mr. Whitaker," the prosecutor began, "how did you find Mr. Turner that morning?" Sam leaned forward, voice steady but filled with restrained anger. "Because of Max. That dog came running through the woods, grabbed my sleeve, and dragged me up the mountain trail. If he hadn't, Jack would have died down there." The courtroom stirred. The prosecutor nodded. "So the dog essentially saved his life?" "More than that," Sam said. "He knew. Somehow he knew what she'd done." Kellerman turned toward the jury. "The bond between a K-9 and his handler runs deeper than words, ladies and gentlemen. Loyalty doesn't lie." The defense objected. "Objection, Your Honor. Emotional speculation." "Sustained," the judge said calmly. "Stick to facts, Mr. Kellerman." Sam stepped down, and next came Maria Alvarez. She moved carefully, her modest dark dress pressed, her silver braid tucked behind her shoulder. Her hands trembled slightly as she was sworn in, but her voice was clear when she spoke. "I found fake documents in the trash," she said. "Papers saying Mr. Turner was transferred to Missoula for therapy, but the signature was forged. I knew it." She reached into her purse and produced a USB drive. "And this is a recording she left on my phone." The prosecutor connected it to a small speaker. Vanessa shifted in her seat, eyes wide. The courtroom fell silent as her voice echoed through the speakers. "When he dies, I'll be the one to sign the rest. They'll never question me. Not when I'm crying." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Vanessa covered her face with her hands, tears streaking her mascara. "I was drunk. I didn't mean it like that." Kellerman turned toward her, expression cold. "You didn't mean it, but you pushed him, didn't you?" Vanessa's sobs echoed through the courtroom. "I was tired. You don't understand what it's like. Every day, the chair, the pity. I wanted peace." "Peace doesn't come from murder," Judge Redcliffe said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension. The prosecutor rested his hands on the podium. "No further questions." The defense tried to paint Vanessa as a desperate woman overwhelmed by years of emotional strain, but the evidence was too strong. Every forged document, every timestamp, every word in that recording built an unshakable wall of guilt. When it came time for Jack to testify, the room fell still. He rolled his wheelchair forward, Max pacing beside him like a sentinel. His voice was calm, but carried weight. "I fought in Afghanistan for years. I've seen men betray, each other under fire. But nothing prepares you for betrayal at home. I loved her, I trusted her, and she looked me in the eye before she let go." A veteran in the back row wiped a tear from his cheek. Jack turned to the judge. "If not for Max and Sam, I wouldn't be here today. They're the reason I'm alive. They're the reason justice even has a chance." The judge nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mr. Turner." Hours passed as the jury deliberated. When they returned, the verdict came swift and unanimous. Guilty on all counts, attempted murder, fraud, and falsification of medical records. Vanessa's composure shattered completely. She slumped in her chair as the bailiff stepped forward with handcuffs. "You can't do this! I loved him!" she screamed, but no one met her gaze. Judge Redcliffe adjusted her glasses. "Mrs. Turner, love is not what you showed. The court sentences you to the maximum penalty allowable under Montana law." As she was led away, the judge turned toward Jack. "Mr. Turner, one more matter." Jack looked up, puzzled. "I've reviewed Dr. Connors' report and your service documentation. Given the exceptional circumstances and the role Max played, this court hereby designates him an official service and emotional support animal under permanent protection by the state of Montana." The courtroom erupted in applause. Max stood tall, ears perked, tail wagging once. Jack leaned forward and rubbed his neck. "You earned it, buddy," Sam grinned from the gallery. "Damn right he did." Judge Redcliffe rapped her gavel once. Court adjourned. As people filed out, the snow outside sparkled beneath the courthouse lights. Jack remained for a moment, hand resting on Max's fur, the weight of justice finally lifting from his chest. Winter was finally loosening its grip on the Bitterroot Mountains. The snow that once buried the valleys now melted into trickling streams, carrying away the last memories of the storm that had nearly claimed Jack Turner's life. The sky above Helena glowed a soft amber that morning, the kind of light that felt like forgiveness. A crowd had gathered on the hillside overlooking the valley, a mix of veterans, neighbors, and volunteers from the small Montana town. They stood before a newly built cabin, its timber walls gleaming under the rising sun. A bronze plaque beside the front door read, "Turner Cabin, built with gratitude and brotherhood." Jack sat in his wheelchair at the top of the ramp, eyes misty, one hand resting on Max's head. The German shepherd's fur shimmered in the light, the old K9 tag on his collar clinking softly as the wind brushed through. Sam Whitaker, his friend and brother-in-arms, stood beside him, wearing a worn leather jacket and jeans still dusted with sawdust. His hands were calloused, his beard thicker now, but his eyes carried the easy grin of a man who'd finally seen justice done. "Not bad for a bunch of old vets, huh?" Jack laughed softly. "You've outdone yourself, Sam. The ramp's smoother than the VA's paperwork." Sam chuckled. "Maria made sure I didn't cut corners. Said if you're going to start a new life, it better start level." As if on cue, Maria Alvarez emerged from inside the cabin, wearing a blue flannel shirt and apron dusted with flour. Her silver braid swung gently as she carried out a tray of cornbread and hot coffee. "Enough talk, both of you," she said with her warm Mexican accent. "Before this gets cold?" Jack accepted the mug, inhaling deeply. The smell of cinnamon and roasted beans filled the crisp air. "Feels like home," he said quietly. Maria smiled, her dark eyes softening. "It is, mijijo. You earned it." In the following weeks, the cabin became a quiet sanctuary. The local Veterans Association had donated funds for a therapy space attached to the back of the property, a room where Jack could host small gatherings for soldiers struggling with trauma. Sam visited daily, helping with repairs and bringing stories from town. Maria cooked for everyone, her food turning every evening into a small celebration of survival. But it was Max who became the heart of the place. No matter where Jack went, down the forest path, to the porch, or to town, Max was there. His movements had slowed slightly with age, but his eyes burned with the same golden fire. He still slept beside Jack's bed every night, his head resting near the wheelchair, as though standing guard even in dreams. One afternoon, the soft hum of tires approached the cabin. A white van pulled up, bearing the logo of the Helena Veterans Therapy Program. From the passenger side stepped Dr. Evelyn Hartman, a tall woman in her early 50s with chestnut hair streaked with silver. Her calm demeanor and gentle tone had earned her the trust of many former soldiers across the state. She wore a brown wool coat and a smile that could thaw winter itself. "Jack Turner," she said warmly, extending her hand. "It's about time we met. I've heard your story has been making its way through every veteran's newsletter from here to Colorado." Jack shook her hand. "Didn't know I was famous." She smiled. "You're not famous. You're hope." Behind her stepped a young boy, no older than 10. He had sandy blonde hair, bright green eyes, and moved with careful, uneven steps supported by a pair of crutches. His name was Carter Miller, a child born with cerebral palsy. His mother, Laura Miller, followed behind, mid-30s, petite, with brown curls framing a kind, tired face. She had that look of someone who had learned to smile through exhaustion, Dr. Hartman crouched beside Carter. "Remember what I told you, sweetheart? This is Max. He's very gentle." The boy stared at the German shepherd, his small hands tightening on the crutches. His breathing quickened. Fear and fascination mingled in his eyes. Jack watched silently, understanding the hesitation all too well, the fear of being seen as fragile. Max tilted his head, studying the boy. Then, with the patience of a saint, he walked forward, each step measured, his tail wagging slowly. When he reached Carter, he sat down and gently laid his head across the boy's trembling hand. Carter froze. Then, almost imperceptibly, his fingers moved, brushing the dog's fur. A smile began to form on his face, uncertain at first, then radiant. Laura gasped softly, tears glimmering. He's never let anyone touch him before." Jack's throat tightened. "That's Max for you," he said quietly. "He doesn't ask for trust. He earns it." For the next hour, Carter stayed by Max's side, stroking his fur, giggling every time the dog's nose nudged his palm. The cabin that had once been a place of silence now echoed with laughter. When the van departed, Laura hugged Jack. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means?" Jack shook his head. "I think I do." That evening, the sun dipped low behind the mountains, casting golden light across the porch. Jack sat with a blanket over his legs, Maria humming softly inside, and Sam working on the final touches of a wooden fence. Max lay beside him, eyes half closed, content. Jack stared out at the horizon, the same hills that once held his pain now reflecting his peace. "You know," he said softly, running a hand through Max's fur, "I lost my legs, lost my marriage, but I never lost hope, because I still had you." Max lifted his head, amber eyes meeting his master's, the fading sunlight caught in them, glowing like twin embers of loyalty. A breeze carried the sound of wind chimes, gentle and steady. Somewhere far below, a hawk cried over the valley. Jack smiled, voice almost a whisper. "We made it, buddy. Together." The sun slipped beneath the peaks, leaving behind a trail of fire across the sky. Another day ending, another beginning born. And as dusk settled over the Montana hills, the cabin light flickered on, spilling warmth into the night like a promise that neither man nor dog would ever be alone again. They say miracles don't always come as thunder or fire from the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, on four paws, with eyes that never look away, and hearts that never stop believing in us even when we've stopped believing in ourselves. Jack's story isn't just about survival. It's about redemption, faith, and the kind of love only God could have written. The love that heals wounds no medicine can reach. The loyalty that reminds us heaven still works through simple creatures on earth. So if you've ever felt broken, forgotten, or alone in your fight, remember this. Sometimes God sends angels not with wings, but with fur and a heartbeat that beats just for you. Before you go, take a moment to share this story with someone who needs hope tonight. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from, because your story matters too. And if you believe that God still works miracles through the loyalty of a dog, hit subscribe, drop an amen in the comments, and may the Lord bless you, protect your loved ones, and remind you, every sunrise is a second chance.